Hi, everybody. Good evening. It is 6 o'clock, and at this time, we're going to get ready to get started with our meeting. It's okay. We'll wait till we're just about ready here. Before we take roll, I would just like to congratulate Board Member Johnson on her very first committee meeting and welcome her warmly to our committee. We're so excited that you're here with us tonight. So thanks for being willing to serve. All right, with that said, at this time, I'd like to call our Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee to order. It is 6 p.m. Ms. Shope, whenever you're ready, if we could do a roll call, please.
Tia Johnson.
Present.
Greg Schneider is not able to be here tonight. And Megan Miller.
Present.
So all members except Greg Schneider are here and present.
Thank you so much. That takes us to 1C, approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to move to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
And I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes, which takes us to item 1D, approval of the minutes. Board Member Johnson and I were able to review the minutes together. Would you like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes for the June 20th Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, that takes us to our information and discussion item for this evening, which is the Boy Scouting in Beloit. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Ms. Fjellstad. Am I saying your name correctly? Perfect. And you can come right up to the mic. Make sure you push the button so that it's red. And we're so excited that you could join us this evening. Thank you.
Before we get started, I would like to say thank you so much for being here again. Me and Ms. Fawcett have had numerous conversations as it pertains to Scouts and the conversation around Scouts.
Yeah.
I know the first time I met you was, I want to say back in December, maybe December-ish, maybe. Or was it a little later? But we've had maybe 3 or 4 conversations.
Yeah, we have.
Opportunities for us to connect with the community is something that, of course, naturally in my position, we do a lot. And again, thank you so much for, being here today. And of course, sharing some information about the Scouts as it pertains to how you all can continue to impact our school district here in the school district of Beloit. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I can't tell you how much we appreciate the refreshing, open opportunities we've had to discuss everything we're talking about. I don't know, maybe on our end, that we've actually had a sit-down before, and it's just been so fruitful. So thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm going to talk for just a minute here briefly to let you know what we're doing. I am a assistant district commissioner for Scouts in our area, and that means that I help Scout units. I'm not necessarily in a unit, except for Merrill, because it's still starting and I haven't replaced me yet. But these two gentlemen are actually more involved in actual units. And Brett's going to come up and talk a little bit about some stats and what we've got to work with, his particular unit. And then David, I don't think, is speaking with us tonight, but David is our next new unit commissioner. So he has just been commissioned, and he will be helping us get into the units when they need resources. So Brett, you want to?
Thanks, Val. So my name is Brett Quimby. I am the Cub Master for PAC 361 that's based out of Robinson Elementary School. I'm going into my second year as Cub Master for that unit just now, but I've been involved with it since 2018, which is when we founded that PAC. So we've been working pretty hard to grow our numbers, have kind of a bigger presence in the community around Robinson Elementary since we started. Obviously, we had some disruptions for a few years due to COVID, so that's been a bit of a problem for us, and we're trying to get back on track now that things are more or less back to normal. So that's kind of what we've been facing, is challenges in getting our PAC to grow, taking advantage of really being able to recruit out of our local community, and particularly in the school community, and just getting a little bit better coordination and cooperation from the school They've been good in a lot of ways. We use Robinson as our meeting place, and we have since we started, which has been great. There's some difficulties in accessing the school just due to security protocols and things, but we have been using that facility for our meetings since 2018. We have received support from the school in some of our recruiting efforts. We're typically present at back-to-school events and other things. We have had members of the school administration come and be a part of some of our events. So there's definitely been a lot of positives. But then on the flip side, we're still not quite where we want to be in just getting some of that cooperation in some of our recruiting efforts. In particular, one of the things that we like to do towards the beginning of the school year is have somebody from our district come out, come into the school, have an opportunity to speak directly with the kids and hand out some information as a recruiting effort. I know that we've done that at Robinson in the past, and it's been done at other schools, but in the recent years, we've been denied the opportunity to do that. Not sure exactly what the reason for that was, but we haven't been able to do that for the last couple of years. Our PAC right now in particular, membership is getting pretty critical this year. We really need to increase our numbers, or this PAC does face the real possibility of having to disband. So that's kind of what we're focused on this year, is just really getting more involvement, more visibility for our PAC, and more opportunities to recruit, more opportunities for us to engage and be a part of school activities and things like that. So that's what we're looking to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. I thought it was important for you guys to hear Brett talking firsthand of one of our units that struggled with access. And Dr. Garrison's kind enough to have 2 meetings, and this is basically what we were addressing. And I do feel in the bottom of my heart that that's probably going to change. And I think we've already got some avenues where we can see a little bit difference in that. But you can understand where the challenges are when we can't reach the kids at the grass level point. How do we let them know that we're here? And I think we're turning that around tremendously, and I really do want to appreciate the different culture of the school board right now, that we're looking more into that as a partnership. Right now, Beloit serves 89 youth between the ages of 5 and 18 in scouting. That currently happens with 4 Cub Scout packs and 4 Scout BSA troops. That's less than 2% of Beloit's available youth. So we've got wide open pastures here to grow with. Over half of the households with kids are single adult homes, and it makes sense for families to reach out to service organizations, particularly like Scouting, to help give them options on raising their children. Our recruiting season is coming up fast, and I am just promoting the dickens out of this thing. It's my favorite new tool. So Brett and I were talking just now tonight about Robinson. Donuts with the principals. So Brett is stepping up immediately, and he is going to have donuts on the 25th with the principals there at Robinson, and then he will continue to pursue his recruitment endeavors. A lot of the buildings that will be contacted for what we call school talks more than likely will be done by myself. We kind of want that to be one consistent point of entry, and then after that, the appropriate leaders will be put in place, and then we kind of have a procedure we go through with sign-up night, scout night, flyers go home, and stuff like that. For Merrill has 9 registered Cub Scouts. We've had 7 consistently attend, which I don't think is too bad for the first kick at the cat. We're down to 5 leaders. 2 had to move away. And so that's the huge challenge, and it's not just Merrill. Our need for adult volunteers is just everywhere. And we've kind of started a different philosophy where instead of telling a person, would you be a den leader, would you be a Cub master, we're breaking that down more into tasks. So could one parent just handle Facebook? Could another parent just handle when we sell our popcorn? And break it down into tasks. So I just want to plead to everybody in the room, if you know anyone who has any time just to even focus on something for a little bit, and it might be seasonal, please get a hold of me. Dr. Garrison knows my number. Please call me because we do have to, like Brett said, it's not necessarily lacking youth. The heartbreak is when we've got the youth and we don't have the adults. There's a program that I want to give you literature on tonight called Adopt a School Program, and I'm really pushing that for the units that are operating out of schools this year because it's very organic, it's stuff the kids are already doing, and basically it's just like it sounds, it's to build a relationship between the school building and the kids. And I know I was born and raised in the Beloit Turner District, and Townview Elementary is still near and dear to my heart because in my many, many years ago, your elementary school was so much your home away from home, and I want to get the kids back to understanding how important that is to build that relationship. Also, I had a phenomenal conversation, happen chance today, with Sam Kranz at Todd Elementary. We have some scouting equipment over there that we're going to take possession back of. Todd had a very challenging time last year. They did have the youth, they did not have the adult leaders, and there was not a pack there. There has been one in the past, so Sam and I talked today, and there's a few other commissioners that are going to get our head wrapped around getting a unit back at Todd again, and we talked a little bit about maybe there might be a relationship between Merrill and Todd. So on August 26th, I'm also promoting that event at Beloit Memorial High School. Basically, the units are going to know what an opportunity that is for a service project. We've got scouts that can help stuff those backpacks and maybe volunteer throughout the course of the day in any given way that they can. So we're really promoting this summertime schedule that you guys have been so good to put together. And I have a magnet for everybody, beascout.org. This is national. You've probably seen them before. This is national, so even if you've got family that has a kiddo anywhere in the nation and they want to know where the nearest scout unit is, beascout.org. I think you put your zip code in and it'll give you an entire roster of the units in that community. So while you guys might not know exactly what school and where we are, this will tell you. So I've got a magnet for all of you for that tonight too. Anything else I can answer, or any questions you have?
Well, first, thank you so much for coming with all the information. And Brett, thank you so much for everything that you were able to share with us. It's really important for us to hear the challenges. I mean, it's obviously, it's like, yay, things are going well. But if we don't have an opportunity to discuss the challenges, then we don't have an opportunity to grow, right? So thank you so much for that. I will read, I know Greg had something that he submitted that he'd like me to read, but before that, Ms. Johnson, did you have thoughts or questions?
Thank you for doing this and bringing this to our attention. My son was involved in Scouts years ago, and I'm trying to get the cobwebs out of the old brain. Is there a cost involved in being a Boy Scout?
Yes, there is, and thank you for bringing that up. It's, David, what is it up to now, 170 something, $75
application fee and about $100 a year.
So for those who couldn't hear at home, you said $75 application fee, and what was it per year?
$100.
And $100 per year, okay.
The beautiful part about our executive director, who's retiring and we'll lose him in a couple of weeks, is that years ago he got a program started in Beloit. It's grant funded, which is how I'm going to probably spend the rest of my 2023. And so we're called Scout Reach in the city of Beloit.
Outreach.
And it costs our scouts, the new rate coming on 2024 is $35. So no scout ever, at least in my career, I think you guys can agree, gets turned away because of finances. We find it somewhere, somehow. So for Beloit being under Scout Reach, I mean, you can understand the huge savings and how come we can get to our scouting to the kids where otherwise that would be a barrier.
Right.
So yes, thank you for asking that. So it's $35. The wonderful thing about scouting is you've got all your other sports, and they're all great sports, but the nice thing about that $35 is that's year-round. That's not just during the school year, because we have awards for packs and unit troops who stay active throughout the summer. They have to just do something in June, July, and August, and Summertime Pack Award. Tomorrow, actually, Merrill's hiking to Merrill Community Garden. And, oh, yes, I wanted to point out, too, Merrill's one of those schools where I felt in my gut that if we let them loose for the summer, we weren't going to see them back in the fall necessarily. So Merrill is running a year-round Cub Scout den meeting program. And with the phenomenal help from Kitty Rounds, the Cub Master at Our Lady of the Assumption, we've had those kids together every Wednesday. It's been phenomenal. They've had a summer scout program. Not very many packs do that, but Merrill's kind of a strange bird, and we want to make sure we keep those kids engaged. And so there again, their actual den meetings and the stuff that they're working on toward their rank advancements is happening, right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Board Member Johnson, any other? All right, thank you so much. Board Member Schneider wanted me to read, he said, apologize to Ms. Fjellstead for my absence, so sorry. He says, I truly support the scouting organizations and the opportunities they provide to the youth of Beloit. The skills that people learn, develop, and demonstrate through scouting give them an advantage in their lives, at school, at work, in community service, and in the military. I would love to see a much stronger relationship between scouting and the school district. As a district, we value the development of our students to become the best they can be. Scouting is one way to achieve that goal. So those were his thoughts to everybody involved.
Great.
Yep. And then I just had a couple, I just need to look over my notes here really quick. Okay. I really appreciate the statistics that you shared about like just the 2% of available youth. And something that I'll share with our committee is something that's kind of on my radar for, as we deepen our implementation of our strategic plan, is really building out that community schools model. And part of being able to do that is going to look for opportunities to grow our volunteer coordinating and look for opportunities with organizations such as yours to just have like a more robust and deeper reach so that we can really touch, and get in touch with like all of the people in our community to meet their different needs, right? So I just wanted to raise that up to our committee members. And I wanted to ask too, just, is scouting at this point, I think you said this last time, it's open to like all, like, it doesn't matter what gender you are.
Not anymore.
Okay,
No, not
cool.
anymore.
Because like
In
I'm
fact,
a mom of 3 girls.
yeah, Merrill has more girls than boys.
Okay, cool.
No, not anymore. It's been phenomenal. And we start at kindergarten.
Awesome. Okay, so anybody, so kindergarten and on, and they
Yes.
can all become like Eagle Scouts.
Absolutely. That's the plan.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, I'll just share, and I think I shared this with you last time too, but for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, you can continue that on into college. I remember doing, like the Merit Badge University. So it's something that can really give you an edge for college applications, can really set you apart. So yeah, like Greg said, just great opportunities. So thank you so much. I don't think I had any other questions. Dr. Garrison, did you have anything?
No, actually, I just want to say thank you again for the report. I know that with like every partnership, there's opportunities for us to be better and overall, my hopes is that we'll of course be better in this conversation as well. There's like you mentioned the summer engagement opportunities there, like we mentioned in our previous meeting. Those would be perfect opportunities to partner with the principals and of course share the information from the scouting perspective. Again, overall, it's our hopes that we again make this partnership better. But thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Well, yes, thank you all, and thank you, Dr. Garrison. It sounds like there's already been some constructive conversations about removing those barriers. So I'd just like to, raise that up and thank you and your administrative team for your work on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for everybody for making the time to come in this evening and, keep us abreast of this important initiative. That takes us to item 3A, our next meeting date. So the next meeting date for the Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee will be Tuesday, August 15th at probably at 5:30. I know we had to switch our meeting time this evening, but we'll keep you posted on that. And if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All right. Any discussion? Great meeting. Awesome. All right. All in favor of adjourning at 6:19 p.m., please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all very much.
Going to call to order the Tuesday, July 18th, 2023 Human Resource Committee meeting at 6:31 PM. Mrs. Schopp, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider is unable to be with us this evening. Amy Levy,
Here.
Megan Miller,
Present?
Sean Levy,
Present.
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Brian Nichols,
Here.
and Tia Johnson.
Here.
All members are present except Greg Schneider.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Megan Miller and seconded by Board Member Amy Levy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy and seconded by Board Member Megan Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, the motion passes unanimously. On to 2A, employment recommendations. A motion may be made to convene the Human Resources Committee into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Is there a motion?
I'll move to move into closed session.
All right, is there a second? Second. It's been moved by Board Member Brian Anderson and seconded by Board Member Brian Nichols. Mrs. Schopp, can you give us a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Tia Johnson,
Aye.
Brian Nichols, Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. So we will The Human Resource Committee has reconvened in public session in order to take any action if necessary or discuss items in public. So I'll open it to the board members for open session questions or action.
I have one thing that I need someone to explain to me, please. So there's kind of a version 1 and a version 2 of employee recommendation A. So hopefully everyone is looking at the most current version. The scope of Mr. Turner's work in version 1 was listed as it would take 14.17 days to complete, and that's pretty specific. So let me just kind of walk you through my thought process, and you can correct me if I made an error. The information that was provided looked as though we were paying as like a contract for this additional work. And so my concern with that is per policy 222.1 rule 2, that any employee who takes on additional duties, so not additional duties that are for a temporary amount of time. So not as a part of my role, I'm doing 3 extra things, and that's now built into my role. So for a temporary amount of time, they can be compensated for, and it's a range from 5% to 15% of their daily average salary. So when I looked at the information, and it was noted that his daily average salary is $282.28. And if we put him at the top, if you all put him at the top of that range, which is 15%, times the 14.17 days, which I love the specificity, that's $600. Now, it was listed as $4,000. So in version 2, it says that this is now going to take 81 days. So I guess my first question is, how did we go from 14.17 days to 81 days? And then my second question, which even under those calculations, it's around $3,500, but then it says plus extra. So it was bumped up to 4,000. Please make that make sense.
Okay, so first of all, good evening. When it came up that we were doing the reconfiguration, we not only captured Mr. Turner taking the initiative to clean up 2 separate databases that contained the different doors to our different buildings in the district, which was it is quite a project in and of itself, but it also came to light the fact that access to buildings was never part of his responsibility. And for the entirety of the 22-23 school year, he had, as asked, and without saying no or turning it away, been granting access or removing access of current employees as they came and went. So when we had a discussion with Mr. Turner about this project that was a lot more than just activating and deactivating current employees, it was a whole cleanup and then resetting everybody to their new buildings, we agreed on an amount that was the total of $4,000 to represent not only the project, but also to help absorb the additional work that he had done throughout the school year. And that when it was gone onto board docs as the $4,000 flat amount, I think that's when the calculation was made to justify the number of days that constituted. And it was never in any of the discussions that were had was that a 14-day project to equate his daily rate to this. And what it was the additional pay at that flat rate to justify not only the summer project, but also the additional work that he had done throughout the school year, because we would otherwise have been looking at up to 15% of the entirety of his daily rate for the entire school year, which would have been greater than the $4,000 that we are requesting currently.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a number was agreed upon, and then we made the equation fit the number. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, you are not. It was very hard. You are correct in that assumption. But when we had the discussion, it had been based on the number of hours that he had already put into the project, but also trying to assess what it would be if we were to compensate for the entirety of those additional duties for the year. That's where agreeing on that number came from, as opposed to 15% for a year-round contract daily rate. Does that make sense?
Not at all.
Okay.
And that might be okay, but look, a couple more questions. So this project is going to take him an entire school year to complete?
No. So this is for the purpose of getting everything set up as part of the reconfiguration. So it's cleaning up everyone who has ever had access that was never removed, individuals who have access to different buildings because they've moved around, and it's 2 different databases. And so cleaning that up so we have a clean slate for the upcoming school year, that came up as a result of moving all the staff around in the building from the middle school to elementaries, et cetera. That's where that surfaced, that we really need to clean this up. So that project in and of itself is happening currently.
So it's not done?
No.
And it could not have started before the end of April because that's when the decision was finalized.
Correct.
So May, June, July, this has been going on for 3 months, and I'm assuming it's going to be completed before the start of the school year.
July 31st, yes.
Okay, so that's 4 months. So this, unless I'm missing something, this sounds like 4 months, 20 days in a month of additional duties. How did we go from 14.17 days on version 1 to 80-something days on version 2 is the part I'm still missing.
Sure. So when we were trying to, when it was tried to be explained why the $4,000, I think the assumption was made that it was based on his daily rate. So it was an error in how it was calculated. There's internal communications contrary to that. So it wasn't until afterwards that we're like, that is not what was agreed upon. And so we looked back on our communications as to what that agreed rate was and why. So it was calculated that way for the purpose of displaying it, and it was not calculated properly. And so it was never a 14-day job. And the other thing with that is, again, that in our discussions as to what the fair compensation would be for that is that it wasn't just about that project. It was also recognizing that throughout the school year, he had been doing the daily activating and deactivating of employees currently. So how do we capture that since he wasn't doing it every day? And so that's where that round figure came from, was to compensate him for the project, but also trying to capture some of the additional work that he'd been doing throughout the school year in that program, which was never part of his job.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I got it. I don't agree with it, but I think I got it. So I will just say, I'm a fan of consistency and I'm a fan of predictability, and policy lays out how employees should be paid for additional compensation. If you're doing extra work, I absolutely believe you should be paid for it. And thank you for your transparency. I am never okay with agreeing on an amount and then trying to back into that amount with an equation. I think we need to be consistent, and wherever that number lands, that's where we are. So this is not something that I'm able to support. And then just so I'm clear, was it like sprinkles on top added, like when we came up to the $3,400 with the equation, and then we just bumped it up a little bit more?
It was in trying to understand the complexity, because I think it's a little nuanced. When you have a teacher who is taking on another classroom because of a vacancy, it's very easy to say, well, 3 teachers are doing it, it's 5% per teacher, and you can quantify that. The problem with this particular situation is that he had taken on these duties, not the cleaning up of the database, but actually keeping up with the FOB, with the current changes throughout the school year. But how do you quantify, did he spend X percent of his time? Was he doing it once a week or every day? So when you get to the tail end and you discover that that's what's been happening, it wasn't really fair to say that's a 5, 10, or 15% for his entire year-round contract, because the volume is not as quantifiable as taking on a classroom. Maybe he activated and deactivated 10 accounts one week, but the next week he didn't do anything with it. So it was, how do we make him whole without, and so when he was agreeable to the $4,000 to calculate the project and everything that he'd done on the FOBs up to date, it seemed like a reasonable amount, considering we can't go back now to the beginning of the school year and start looking at when did he go in there, when did he do this or that. So that's why the number is not necessarily like the flat 5, 10, 15% that our policy pertains to, because it's not tangible, it's not as quantifiable for the duration of the school year as it is just the summer session of the cleanup.
No, thank you so much. You have done a beautiful job of explaining something that seems very messy. I'm just not able to support it because it doesn't sound like we follow policy. Thank you.
I also want to just note that thought to Board Member Levy. You know, when we're looking at safety and security in our buildings, getting this right was very important to the district. We have people who have left the district who still had access to our district, and these themes we don't uncover until we start asking again these questions. And unfortunately, this is another question that I had to, came across. Well, I say unfortunately. Fortunately, these are things that we come across so we can actually make corrections, throughout the school year. And so this is something that was discussed. I had a conversation with Ryan myself, even when we were talking about, safety and security of our schools and what it actually looks like. And this conversation came up unbeknownst of me, knowing that he had already started to break down like who have access. 'Cause I had questions about access to our buildings, and many people having access to our buildings who are no longer in our district. And these were the questions that I was, coming up with. And he, of course, didn't tell me he had already been working on it, but he did say to me that he was definitely looking into this and he wanted to get it right for the school district. And I think at this current time, that's one of my things that I'm leaning on, that this is something we want to get right. Everybody shouldn't have carte blanche access to any building they want to have. And if you work in Converse, you should be at Converse. We shouldn't have, you can just go to any building you want to during the summertime because you have access. That should be monitored and cut off and or on. And so I'm just sharing that, Mrs. Levy, because when it came to me that we had some of these issues, I went to Ryan to say, hey, what's what we're looking at here? And so I just wanted to make sure I noted that.
One other question is, once this project is done, you said July 31st, does somebody have that responsibility now? Okay, because I know it said it kind of was IT for a while and nobody knew who was supposed to do it.
Yeah, facilities or IT or Ryan. So right now, after that meeting with Mr. Turner, the discussion was it's starting to make more sense that it fall in his wheelhouse. Because access to buildings, safety, et cetera. And so it is a discussion about revising his job description to capture that additional job duty as part of his compensation so that it can stay with him. I mean, he's going through so much trouble to clean it up. We'd hate to hand it off again, and then we have to go back to this situation when truly he has done an amazing job at keeping up with it and, again, cleaning it up. So it is being discussed to become a permanent part of his job duties moving forward.
Okay.
So just for clarification, and absolutely this is important, since this is going to become a permanent part of his job, then there would no longer be additional pay.
Correct. We'd be discussing what those changes to his job description mean as far as percentage of the volume of his work, of his different duties. And if there is a need to look at his pay then we would do so. If there isn't, then we will not, but it will become a part of that compensation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I got one more thing for you on Exhibit A. We've hired a director of financial services, and we haven't had that position for some time. Can you just kind of explain how long we've been without that position and
I'll start, and I'll turn it back over to Mrs. Almendares if needed. So the Director of Finance position has been vacant in our district since the departure of Wendy LaPointe back in November. With that being stated, now we have a Executive Director of Finance, Business Services, I should say, and Mr. Chady, and we've been working to solidify Wendy LaPointe's position since Mr. Chady's arrival. Actually, I was looking for both at the same time, to be honest with you, and of course we landed with Mr. Chady's services, and now we have to fill the Director of Finance position.
Thank you.
Talking about a lot of money, but what are the needs for interns? Oh, sorry. It's struggling, the other one won't work. Musical microphones, let's try that. So again, it's not it's not a huge deal. I'm just curious why we have a couple of interns for CAC is it for the year? Is it, and you know, we're losing students, we close schools, you know, we reduce staff at the schools, but we're adding people to CAC.
Well, these are opportunities actually for our own students.
Okay.
To be able to be a part of the school district at different capacities. And so we do have departments that welcome, you know, their fresh ideas and their support of the work that we're doing by providing those internship opportunities and trying to grow our own within the student body. And do you want to add anything additional?
I mean, that's pretty much. Let me just say that when we have opportunities for students to come and work with us, we explore those opportunities, whether it's here at Keck or hopefully maybe in the future at the building level as well. So that's what that is, Mr. Nichols.
Okay, that's good. No, I'm in favor of that. I didn't know they were students. There again, that might be helpful information on it.
I have one additional open session question. So in regards to our Director of Finance, you maybe already explained this, but I'll ask again. There's a question I was asked, the board was asked by a citizen. Can you explain to me why we are hiring another administrator when we are closing 2 schools and student population is dipping every year? The district is overstaffed on the administrator side, and the district needs to take cuts in this area. Sincerely, so why did we hire a Director of Financial Services?
Well, the number of schools closing does not really change the operation and the business needs of the school district, most especially when it comes to the finance sector, which is one that we really need support. When Ms. Wendy LaPointe was here and she had taken on the additional duties of the Executive Director of Business Services, it was a struggle to maintain both the cabinet level and the day-to-day level of those offices, because it oversees, the executive director oversees more than just finance. And so having a director of finance allows that direct alignment for the business office to provide the service that we need, budgets, especially right now that we're trying to work through a deficit budget. But I can let Mr. Chady speak a lot more eloquently to that need.
I understand the question. I'm not sure that the public understands where we're at is probably the best way to frame it. So, we operate a $100 million budget. Perhaps we can reduce that. You still need to have those positions. I'm very fortunate and thankful to be here to serve the school district of Beloit. It's been a great 4+ months, and I wouldn't change anything about it. Without that director of finance position, I'll be very honest with you, I'm not sure that I'd stick around long, because the level of the work is there's a lot to do, and without the appropriate support. There's been some comments about Mr. Duff and our interim executive director, and that individual still being around, and he is, Mr. Duff has been driving the budget building process for the 23-24 school year much more so than I. And it would be rather foolish to depart his services prior to that being in a good spot. Mr. Duff works 1 day a week on site. He does do some remote work from home, but typically no more than a day and a half a week. Keep in mind that, again, the Director of Finance position has been vacant since the end of November, beginning of December timeframe, a number of months there. Within the umbrella of the Director of Business Services is also Facilities, and our Director of Facilities departed the end of May. The number 2 in the Facilities Department, the Supervisor, departed the end of May as well. The worst time in the world to have 2 members of your facilities team leave a school district. I've been carrying a lot of that weight along with Christy Kaufman, our admin assistant for facilities, Cindy Ritzert for HES as well. Really wasn't what I was hired to do, but somebody's got to do it. So there's been a lot of work, over the last 4 months. And unfortunately, I don't think the public sees all of that, or we haven't had yet the opportunity to address those concerns yet. So hopefully this evening does that.
Let me just add, and I think we should, thank you, Mr. Chady, for your commentary. I think the school district has to also understand that when you're working in a district, everyone is taking on multiple different opportunities to make things better. And oftentimes it takes people to do that, right? Not oftentimes, it takes people to do that because we're trying to make things better. And when we have a certain job description that's not being fulfilled, that oftentimes fall on more people to do more with less, and sometimes with less time. One could argue, even when I assumed the role as district administrator, there was no executive director of finance. So it was just me and a consultant for 5 months. There's a lot of things that had to transpire in this office that I was taking on the responsibilities to move forward as a school district. But there's a lot of other times when things happen in teaching and learning, when things happen in pupil services, when things happen in HR, or when things happen in the building, right, with teachers. And so there's a lot of different times where people are taking on additional responsibilities. But when we have the opportunity to bring somebody in, we should take those opportunities if the board, approves the vote. And so that's kind of why I think the Director of Finance position is a very important position, because we are working through some very difficult budgetary concerns. Very difficult budgetary concerns here in our school district, where we have to start really looking at all things money to determine whether or not our impact was where the board, I would believe, where the board will want us to be. And so we'll hear a little bit more about this in our regular board meeting, but I just want to make sure that I bring attention to that again. When we have the opportunity to bring somebody in to help do the work, we should explore those opportunities as such. But there's a lot of time where we don't have anybody, and people are pulling up so many, routes and different opportunities to do the work, and it becomes a lot.
No, I appreciate that. It's just a question that was asked, and like some people ask, why did we hire a superintendent? Because you need somebody to do the work. So we appreciate the answers to the question. It's a lot easier than writing emails out, You can point people to the video of the meeting. All right, any other questions for open session?
Yes, along that same line to the letter that you just read, I was perusing the website when I finally had some time to do that, and I see we have a position for Director of Human Resources. So again, to answer the question that was sent in, do we need it?
I'll reiterate my statement. Mrs. Allman-Daris is the Executive Director of Human Resources. We have at the current time, when I first got here, we had a little over 700 or so employees. That's one person to do everything HR. One person. And that's investigations, that's hiring, that's everything. One person. Now, in a regular world, one person to do the extent of running a school district from a human resource and capital conversation, it's a lot. We had this position in our district before, okay? It went away for a time period in which Mrs. Almendares has fulfilled doing both roles all year. And it's come to the point where if I had to have conversations around, okay, the capacity, can we keep this up? And that's something that, again, sometimes the community may not understand. But again, you have one person to do everything HR. Now, good thing I had some background in HR a little bit. And so we team and we partner with some things that a lot all throughout the year. And again, I thank you for your partnership, Mrs. Almendares.
Thank you.
And assisting me in getting some things done as well. And so, but to have this other person to run this entire school district from a human capital perspective is necessary. Yes, we do have declining staff. I mean, we're looking at, of course, making some cuts as it pertains to, staffing in general. We've made some cuts as it pertains to staffing in general. But if we go from 700 to 600, it's still one person doing it for the entire school district. The level of expertise that Mrs. Almendares also brings, people also don't understand. She's certified to have these conversations. Where when it comes to Title IX or certain investigations, there's qualifications that comes with doing this job that people of her caliber should have. And so finding that person, if we, move forward with this position, Director of Human Resources, to assist in this conversation will be a huge load in balancing the work. Not only that, we have directors in teaching and learning. We have directors in pupil services. And so not to have one in a director, I should say, in human resources, to me, again, is not a balance in conversation. It's more of a need. And so I just want to make sure people understand that commentary as well. Thank you.
I move approval of Exhibit A minus the school safety coordinator additional compensation position.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Board Member Levy and seconded by Board Member Megan Miller.
Oh, that's
Is there any discussion?
President Levy?
Yes.
The typing error, $125 a day rather than hour?
Yep. Do you want to?
Yeah, we can to as amended because we had that conversation for the edit. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other discussion?
So are we,
We'll bring it back.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we're not approving based off of the vote, of course.
So I made the motion to omit it because I'm not able to support it. So it needs to be separated out. If someone else would like to bring that up, they are more than welcome to do so, and I will just vote nay.
Thank you for the clarification.
Here to help.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right. I don't know if that was that unanimous or no? Are there any? Okay, that was unanimous, I'm sorry. All right, so the motion passes. So then we're on to 3A, our next meeting date. Next meeting date is Tuesday, August 15th, 2023 at 6:30 PM. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So move.
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Brian Anderson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously, and we'll start our next meeting in about 5 minutes. So on a call to order the regular board meeting, July 18, 2023, regular board meeting at 7:46 PM. And call to order. Mr. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider is not able to be with us this evening. Tia Johnson,
Here.
Brian Nichols,
Here.
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Megan Miller,
Present?
Amy Levy,
Here.
and Sean Levy.
Present.
All members are present except Greg Schneider.
For the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Megan Miller and seconded by Board Member Amy Levy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I think we're on to Pledge of Allegiance. Board Member Miller, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. You know what? All right, to go back for a minute. The Board of Education would like to let our families and viewers know that our regular board meetings are being simultaneously interpreted. You can watch the Spanish interpreted meeting through the link found at the board website under the Watch Meetings tab with tonight's date. In order to accommodate this interpretation, we will be monitoring the pace of our meeting to allow time for the interpretation, and I'd like to remind our board members and others speaking to please speak one at a time. Thank you so much for consideration and understanding. All right, we're now on to E, new board member appointment. And we're going to introduce, we've already sworn in Board Member Johnson, but we will reenact that swearing in. Megan, are you going to? I'm ready. All right. So we have our, yep.
Start the show, so you can just, I'll just stand over here. Okay. So I'll say one thing at a time and then you just repeat. Okay. So I, Teresa Johnson, or Tia,
I, Teresa Johnson,
having been appointed to the office of school board member,
having been appointed to the office of school board member,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of said office
the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So also I'll be appointing Board Member Johnson to our Business Operations and Finance Committee. So that is Brian Anderson as our chair, Brian Nichols, and Board Member Johnson. Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services, Megan Miller, chair, Greg Schneider, and Tia Johnson. Our Policy Committee is Amy Levy, Megan Miller, and Greg Schneider. Our Human Resources Committee is a committee of the whole. And our Governance Committee is Board Member Brian Anderson, Megan Miller, and myself. So those are your committee assignments, filling in where Board Member Spencer Anderson was. All right. Mr. Shope, do we have public comment?
No, we do not.
Nobody in the audience?
Nobody filled out a form.
And no email?
No, I have no email.
All right. So we are rolling to the board president report. The Board of Education advertised for the vacancy from June 9th to June 28th for our vacant board member seat. Applicants were notified of interviews for July 11th, beginning at 6:05 p.m. Applicants were interviewed in a round-robin style of questioning. Following interviews, the board members voted and appointed Teresa Tia Johnson as the new board member in a 4-2 vote. Tia has previously served on the Board of Education and will fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Spencer Anderson. Ms. Johnson will be serving the remainder of his term, which is until April 2024. So join me in welcoming Tia back to the board and congratulating her for stepping up to help our community out again. All right. And I did congratulate Isaac also earlier. I told him that his work was not in vain. He's a good supporter.
I'm surprised he didn't stay just to yield 3 minutes to somebody.
All right. All right, we're on to the superintendent report.
First of all, again, Mrs. Johnson, thank you for joining the board. Well, I look forward to working with you here in the near future. Naturally, since you were sworn in, we've already had some fun conversations, brief conversations, I should say. But again, the work is long, and of course, the road is the road, right? And hopefully, your leadership on the board and your conversation on the board will be fruitful for helping our school district's mission move forward. That was my, again, thank you and welcome to the board. I'll just jump right in real quick and just say that, you know, over the summer months, there's always something that's happening in the district. We don't close. Sometimes people, we know the school district is open. The summer school is happening. Teachers are still teaching. Kids are still coming and going. Registration, of course, happened over this past week. I would like to thank everybody who has participated in our early registration over July 11th and the 13th last week. And again, that was a change for our school district because typically we have enrollment opportunities in August district-wide, and this was a change for us to kind of bring it back to the month of July to make sure that when we are talking about the school district of Beloit, it's a place where people want to be and, of course, be early. And so July was an opportunity for us to do that. There's still opportunities for your child to be enrolled naturally. Just because we had those in-person opportunities on July 11th and 13th, you can still come to the school district here to enroll your child at any time. Naturally, we did or online, of course. Sorry, yeah. Naturally, you know, we had the big opportunities where we had support and people that came here to the high school for the orientation, for the enrollment. But again, now that those 2 big days are, kind of behind us, people can still come and enroll your child and register your child both online and or in person here at the school district at the KEC building. There will be also opportunities throughout the summer. If you reach out to your school building principal, we can figure out possibilities for you to register at your school as well. So I just want to make sure I bring note to that. A few other summer engagement opportunities that we've had. I want to thank the teaching and learning team for really putting together opportunities for our kids. One would be the Fire Service Summer Academy. Over the past couple of weeks, a few days here, we want to thank the City of Beloit Fire Department, the Fire Department Pandemic leader, DeCarlos Nora, one of the leaders, I should say, and Fire Chief Daniel Peace for offering our Aldrich and Fruzen Middle School students the opportunity to participate in their Fire Service Summer Academy program for the last 2 weeks. And again, that partnership, that opportunity there for our kids to get out and to really play with the fire, not just play with the fire hose, but really get like CPR training to learn fire safety. There's a lot of things that transpire with that program, and we look to have more kids participate in that in the coming years to come. I had the opportunity to go out and see some of the things that they were doing, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And so, thank all of our service workers for their time and dedication. Of course, you all know that we have our family summer engagement events. Again, it provides us opportunities to stay engaged with our students throughout the school year and families throughout the school year. And please note that we didn't say you can only come to Fruzen's opportunity if you're going to Fruzen next year. But any family member that get this opportunities that we've pretty much put in every opportunity we could possibly put it in, you can go and enjoy these opportunities, these engagement opportunities with our district, because we do want our students to know that although the school is out, there's still a connection with your school. It's been widely accepted as an engagement opportunity for our families, and we just look forward to more families coming out. If you got the flyer, and please enjoy those opportunities. Student highlights real quick. Amina Alonzo and Amaya Clark were selected to conduct the Gladiator March with the Beloit Janesville Symphony Orchestra. And so although, again, our school is out, our students are still being recognized in many different opportunities, especially here with our music programming. And so congratulations to Amina Alonzo and Amaya Clark for this awesome opportunity they have with the Beloit Janesville Symphony Orchestra. The Beloit High School football team, not to say this because Mr. Pupil is in the room today, but our high school football team did a fundraiser last week. Senior Sarah, I may pronounce her last name wrong, Romson, sorry, thank you. Sarah Robinson shot a hole-in-one to help her team of Ken Johnson, John Wong, and Kai Wong take first place. And so the football program was able to donate $1,500 to Project 1649. Again, these partnerships that we have in the community are, it's, again, something that, we thrive with. And so, again, our students are still being recognized. Our kids are still doing things great for our community. And again, these are things that makes Beloit, Beloit. We also have summer school still happening. And again, our last day of summer school, I believe, is July 28th. And so it's a gentle reminder that our last day of summer school will continue through the week of July 28th, I should say. I'd like to highlight that we had over 800 students enroll in our summer program. 800. That's a lot. And so kudos to our staff who went out and to help recruit this opportunity. Naturally, we do a lot in this conversation, but again, it takes the families to see this as an engagement opportunity for our students throughout the summer and academic learning opportunities for our students out the summer. And it takes parents, making this happen as well. And so I just want to make sure I noted that we had over 800 students enrolled in our summer school program this year. And I'm sorry that my camera was halfway. No one told me my head was not all the way in the screen. Sorry. You can access our Facebook page to view our engaging and fun activities and learn opportunities for our summer school students. But again, kudos to our 800 students that have participated in our summer school programming. Additionally to my board report, I want to bring some attention to our 7th and 8th grade athletic offerings. As you know, this was some of the conversations that we had with the reconfiguration, and I wanted Mr. Dupuy to come and just share kind of a snapshot of where we are in this conversation, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Dupuy.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. I appreciate the board having me here tonight to talk a little bit about 7th and 8th grade athletic offerings for the upcoming school year at Aldridge and Fruzen. So there's a few couple slides on there, kind of where we were at this year as it pertains with what we did with 4 intermediate schools. We were able to play a round robin with our single round robin with each other with our 6-week season and have a culminating event at the high school. Moving forward with 2 middle schools, we had to be pretty creative. So for the last handful of months, I've been reaching out to surrounding middle school ADs and conferences to see if they were able and willing to allow Beloit, School District Beloit, Fruzen, and Aldridge to fit into their schedules, what their schedules look like, what was their philosophy around interscholastic athletics, what were their policies and rules and when it comes to it. And so the best option I felt in talking with Beloit Memorial High School head coaches in our virtually monthly meetings, our middle school ADs and our weekly meetings, and face-to-face with a lot of individuals, is the Rock River Conference. And they were willing to collaborate with us and achieve a solution to give our kids an opportunity, so I'm very appreciative of them. The Rock River Conference is made up of Rockford Public Schools middle schools, Harlem and Freeport is within their conference. Now they run 12-week seasons that are aligned with the ISHA, Illinois State High School Association. So trying to fit our 6-week seasons into their 12-week seasons. We've come up with some barriers, but we've laid out kind of looking at our schedule, our district schedule, and giving them dates. We've been able to collaborate and kind of work through some things and get especially season 1 schedule off and going, and then working through the rest of them throughout the year. I understand that this isn't ideal for everybody. We will be traveling more. We will be playing on the weekends. There are some Saturday games. fields, shared facilities might have to happen. Some seasons are shifting. Soccer is going to be offered as co-ed this year. But we had to really align with their framework because we couldn't just play each other, right? So our option this year was going forward. We had good success. We participated with them in swim last year, and there was a lot of good feedback. And so we're going to try to incorporate this year. Then we'll assess again at the end of this year to see where we're at moving forward. But really, they were the option that we felt comfortable with. Middle school interscholastic athletics is about exposure, opportunity, and skill development. This does that by offering us more games against outside students, outside competition, and the ability to grow and learn. One thing that I came into last year was having our kids compete outside of Beloit, right? But we don't have the means necessarily to be on the AAU and travel teams. And when I was having conversations with the Rock River Conference, their ideals aligned with what we're talking about academically and athletically, and they're not an AAU conference, they're not super teams. Their demographics are very similar to ours, so we felt like it matches well. So I'm looking, as you can see on the second one, it kind of highlights what we're looking to do for sports offerings, bringing back track this year. Hopefully, we need to continue to build that program and offer that. But then we'll assess too. Most schools will have their own team based off of numbers from last year, unless they improve dramatically. For cross country and golf, they'll practice. Cross country will practice at their own schools, but then they'll go together as one team. We'll have one football team at each school. Like for soccer, we'll have a JV and a varsity team, so that's going to be a little bit different as well. So there are some variables that we're going to work through, and I look to get information out to parents and guardians and students to start getting collecting data and what they're interested in, and the season dates and those types of things the first week of August. I'm working with the middle school principals as well, and then we've already been working on trying to figure out transportation and those types of things. So that's kind of where we're at, 7th and 8th grade.
Thank you, Mr. Dupuy. I think one of the key points of this conversation is that, we are expanding our opportunities for, athletics to happen. Not only, of course, we used to play against ourselves for quite some time, and now, naturally with sports, you want to play against other people in that conversation. So I think this gives us opportunities to kind of expand. And maybe, and I say maybe when people see this expansion, other districts want to probably jump in and with this middle school conversation, because in certain areas, sometimes middle school sports is not necessarily an offering. In ours, it is. And that's a product of what Beloit really wants. And so we want to make sure we continue that conversation as much as possible. So again, I know it's a huge lift that I asked you to kind of start to explore. And now we are at this conversation. Again, I want to thank you for your time that you put in to do the job. And I know there's going to be some things we still got to work through. And naturally, the board, please note that as we work through those themes, as changes are made, we will keep you abreast as much as needed, as much as possible. So, but we do have a season. We are looking forward to seeing how that transpires. And again, go Purple Knights and Beloit.
May I? Thank you. One, I'm so excited. Thank you for being proactive and finding opportunities for our kids, because I think that's super important. Just one quick question, because I know you said that teams will practice at their own school, and if it's a unified team, then they go together. Well, actually, two questions. So what would uniforms look like? Because if it's a or combined team, will it be like Aldridge Frusen?
They still would just wear their home uniforms. Right now, that's where we're at. We might look to purchase something together, right? Those are kind of the intangibles. Right now, like for example, cross country, depending on numbers, right? Do we look to purchase, once we get numbers, do we look to purchase something that just says Beloit? Or do we look to just, hey, we have Frusen, we have a set of Frusen, we have a set of Aldridge, right? We're gonna have to expand our inventory too. with some jerseys because hopefully we have some more numbers, right? We can't wear Cunningham, we can't wear McNeil, right? And so, that's one of that, trying to collect data and try to get that. We're going to play some catch up like we did this year, and trying to get people set. I'm a big proponent that we have to look good, to feel good, to play good, right? And some of the things that our kids are in, we need to invest in, and we do have a rotation and those types of things. But so that's something that we got to see where we're at, and entry wise, how does that affect with their bylaws, when it comes to like cross country and stuff.
Okay, no one has asked me, but I am a supporter of the Beloit idea.
Okay.
So there's that. And then for co-ed golf, would they still be practicing at Kruger?
Yes, they would. From right now, they would still be practicing at Kruger. That's where our high school team practices, and yeah.
Thank you.
Any other board member questions for Mr. Dupuy? Just a question about 4th and 5th grade activities. Is this 6, 7, 8?
This is 7th and 8 right now, and so right now throughout the year, I've had a lot of conversations with our community partners, right, and a lot of cities K through 6 are run through our community, community things. The Y, Boys and Girls Club, other leagues that are off, that are supplement kind of the 7th and 8th grade in the high school sports season. So we're hoping to continue to grow and expand those opportunities and get our kids more involved, break down those barriers. We've talked about barriers of why our kids aren't participating in some of the Y activities. How can we bring coaches from the Y and still have per se a Hackett team or I'm dating myself, but like a Burge team, right? Back in the day when I was at Burge, we had, Burge and Royce, and we were centrally located. And you still had your school team, but we brought people in. So we're looking at that. So we're hoping that they continue to expand in that. This does potentially offer some expansion in the Rock River Conference. Depends how it goes. They do offer some 6th grade things that we could look at down the road. They do offer some more sport offerings. But again, with that comes some variables, some overlapping of seasons and things like that. So right now it's 7th and 8th. But again, based on some numbers last year too, we had to allow some 6th graders to participate in some teams, just so we could fill some teams. Hopefully, with the 2 schools, we get enough 7th and 8th graders to participate, and that's where we're at right now.
Yep, understandable. All right. You got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're on to committee reports. Business Operations Finance Committee, Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services, Governance Committee, Legislative Update, and the Policy Committee.
I'll jump in. The Business Operations and Finance Committee met last Tuesday on the 11th. We went over May financials and touched on the state's biennial budget, which we'll see that on the agenda later today as well. And then the May financials and the consent agenda. So we'll touch both of those today, and our next meeting is August 1st.
Hi, everybody. I chair the Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee. Today, I'm going to hold up a visual aid. We heard from the Boy Scouts. If you are interested in scouting, you can go to beascout.org and find our Beloit branches on there, which we're so excited to have. So we had a great update that highlighted what's going really well for our partnership with local scouting. We also heard some challenges that were identified, and I was really pleased to hear that our administration has already been proactive in meeting with the organization to remove barriers and help expand these opportunities to students and families. There are options for boys and girls and any gendered child to participate in scouting with the School District Beloit Partnership. There is a cost involved, but there's also, I guess, a grant that covers most of the cost, and they said that, they don't want that ever to be a barrier for children. So if you are interested in scouting, the information that was shared with us tonight indicates that we have building a robust relationship with that group. And if anybody, I guess, I don't know if we have the like on the website, what their contact information is. I know it was posted on the agenda, right, Ms. Falstad's?
Yeah, Mrs. Foster's information was posted on the agenda. But
Perfect.
if anyone is interested, naturally, they could also reach out to my office or the communications office to see how we can put them in contact with Mrs. Foster.
Fantastic. There's also, I'll do a quick pitch too. They also provided some literature about an Adopt a School program, which is pretty cool. It just says the Adopt a School program is a way for PACs to build relationships with local schools. Participating PACs work with school administrators to offer volunteer services that help the school's needs. So that's very exciting, and they have a lot of opportunities delineated on this paperwork as well. And then lastly, they're actively seeking adult volunteers because they also have some school sites where there are many children interested, but they're lacking the adult support. So if you are looking for a way to get involved in our community and do something with youth, this might be a great opportunity for you. But that was our only agenda item for today. Thanks.
The Governance Committee, we didn't meet in June, but in June we did have board development on 6/13 and on 6/29 and 7/10. We did meet for superintendent evaluation, which those are some of the other items that are encompassing in the Governance Committee, the things that need to be done, but we didn't meet in the committee itself, but did the work of that committee as we participated in our board development with our board consultant, Drew Howick, and worked as the board to complete, and we're still working through the superintendent evaluation. Legislative update and policy committee.
Thank you. So for the legislative update, I saw Mr. Shady put together a really great presentation about the budget implications. So I'm just going to defer to the later agenda item for our budget or for our legislative update.
The policy committee, the meeting for August will be moved from the first Wednesday of the month to Wednesday, August 9th, to accommodate schedules of the team, and we'll still meet at KEC at 5:30. So just wanted to note that scheduling change.
We're now on to 5, consent agenda. Is there anyone with a need to remove anything from the consent agenda, or is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
I have a couple items.
That you would like removed?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All right. Which items would you like?
So we just need to vote down the motion then.
It's been moved by Board Member A. Levy, seconded by Megan Miller. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Oh, sorry, nay. I'm sorry, I got really confused.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Nay.
Nay.
Nay.
It's unanimous. All right. Board Member Nichols, you wanted to remove some items from the consent agenda.
Okay, I just want some clarification on the first, policy 187. So what is the reason for changing from 2 to 1 other person?
Okay, hold on for a minute. I guess I'll say, so you had only, so the first one being
187.
letter B. Do you have any other items or just that item?
No, also G.
B and G.
B and
Okay.
G.
All right, so then what we'll do is we'll go forward with approval of the consent agenda minus B and G, and then we'll address B and G. All right.
I move approval of the consent agenda minus items B as in boy and G as in George.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Board Member Brian Anderson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda minus items B and G signify by saying aye.
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 All right. And I think that's unanimous, correct? Just sometimes I'm hearing and not seeing. So the motion passes. And we have B and G. So Board Member Nichols has questions about B.
Well, again, the only question I have is changing, on behalf of a group more than from two to one. That limits the time, and from my short experience on the board, I really respect what we have been doing with up to 2 additional 3-minute times. So I think in the interest of free speech, that's a great idea to keep it that way.
Board President Levy, would it be helpful if I gave some of the context for how this came out of policy?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'll be brief. So if you have a moment to open up the policy, you'll note items in pink were proposed for removal, items in green for addition. And the committee felt strongly, and I think there was consensus, that our current public comment policy was working. Now, the reason that it was 2 to 1, for the switch from 2 additional speakers to 1 additional person, the conversation around that is in most cases, we have no or little public comment. There are some moments where we have a lot of public comment, which we welcome, and allowing the time to go from 9 minutes to 6 minutes offers more voices to be heard. So I appreciate your comment with free speech, and we are in no way hindering free speech. In fact, we cap who can participate in public comment. So that was the rationale, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with that, but that was the context of the discussion. And then just for, to make sure everyone's on the same page, the other thing that was added is that signage or banners shouldn't impede anyone's view. That was the thing that was added. And then one thing that I'm really proud of is that as far as information that needs to be provided in order to participate in public comment, your home address, your last name, et cetera, we're still going to retain that information so we have it for our records. But if this passes, we will no longer be requiring the individual at the mic to say, "Hi, my name is Amy Levy and this is my home address," because these meetings are re-aired on the World Wide Web. So those were the structural changes that the committee is proposing.
All right. I guess we're actually in a discussion phase. Any other questions or items or questions about B? Yeah. I'll give some context too, just as we're in B. For me, I thought that, like I said, our policy was fine also. We've actually, most recently as a board, if you look at like the prior revision dates, 10/19/21, 1/28/20, 1/29/2019. There was a time when a former board rewrote these policies, and then even as on the time that I've been on the board, when policies were applied as they're written, there was a question as to whether an individual was being denied their opportunity to express themselves as they had wrote an email that they wanted to be read. But when we talk about what the policy writes or how the policy is written about the type of speech that'll be prohibited, it is at the discretion of the chair when you read that policy. So there was some work that we had to do with our lawyer to revise our policy to make sure that we were not disenfranchising citizens. But the basic outcome of that is, as we read, many of these things are subjective, and the one objective point in it is how long we're allowing people to speak. Sometimes I think people misunderstand the public comment section. As we said, people are in a democracy, you have the right to express yourself. And one of the things I pointed out most recently in our conversation with our community is, hey, we're from Beloit too. You got to be respectful. People are public servants, and no one is here to be disrespected People have difference of opinion, that's totally fine. Express your difference of opinion. But we do need to be neighborly. And it's just the level of uncivility is not necessary. So, as we come back around, I think that, there's always an opportunity to look at policy. To a degree, 6 minutes is a long time to actually speak on a topic. And if we're at the point where people do need to speak for 9 minutes on a topic, there's a different way to kind of go about that when we have our committee meetings and then the space itself. So, to me, the policy changes, I think they're kind of minor in that sense, but we're still preserving that people will be able to speak, which is a right. But I recognize those changes, but that's kind of where that is.
Board President Levy, if I might, everyone, please forgive me because there is one major thing that we were intentional about highlighting that I didn't just address. So again, please forgive me. If we look at that first paragraph, the last sentence highlighted in green, and again, this is about being inclusive and allowing more voices into the conversation to ultimately potentially impact policy and decisions. Individuals recognized by a committee chair are able to speak regarding noticed agenda items during committee meetings. Now, again, that's at the discretion of the chair. That has always been the practice, but we were intentional about writing that into policy so that people can be aware of their ability to participate. And these are in committee meetings, not our regular board meetings.
If I may jump in quick too, Mr. Nichols, I'm on the policy committee, and I just want to actually voice in support of what you're saying. So I was kind of the dissenting opinion on that as well. I also support keeping it at 9 minutes. If there are disabilities in terms of speech or literacy, sometimes people come with things written and prepared and there's slower processing time. I just want to make sure we're being as inclusive as possible. So I also would support keeping it at up to 2 people. I just wanted to add that to the conversation since we're discussing it.
Thank you.
First of all, I like, everything on the committee worked it on the policy, the additions, I love it. With respect to the 2 versus 3 minutes, or 6 versus 9 minutes, I'm sorry. I understand it might not be used that often, but in my year on the board, when it was used, it was because it was topics that, they garnered a lot of public attention. And I think if that only comes into play, you can make one argument and say, look, it only comes into play twice a year, so let's just move it down to 6 minutes maximum. But you can make the same argument and say, well, if it only happens twice a year, why don't we just leave it at 9 minutes and let people use that time to get the public comment? So I would support everything with this policy, with the exception of, leaving that at the potential 9 minutes as well.
I'm just going to share, it's not the fact that we, again, are limiting free speech. That's not the thought at all. There's different opportunities for people to have conversations at the board level to get additional time. They can call their board member. That's an option. They could actually have conversations with district administration. That's an option where it doesn't necessarily have to be in a board meeting. And so it's not limiting anyone to speak free speech. People can have conversations with me and my administrative team. I'm pretty sure that the people reach out to the board members as well and have additional conversational time. And so I don't want anyone to think that because the committee moved from a 3-people opportunity to a 2-person opportunity that we are limiting opportunities for anyone to talk or have conversations with us on detailed conversations. The board also has different opportunities where they can have listening sessions where people can come and speak as much as you want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at a board meeting. And so these are the opportunities that, again, if it is something that we would like to explore, we could do that at the board level. My job as the school district administrator is just to bring different opportunities or different thoughts and how we can actually still have public comment and still everyone meets their time frame in which they would like to discuss a conversation. Whether it be in a special board meeting, we can have listening session where they contact you one-to-one. They can contact our offices as well, and still have those open opportunities to have a discussion about whatever topic that one may want to discuss. And so I just want to make sure I added that thought because that did come into our conversation and our thoughts.
I have a question and comment. President Levy, Mrs. Levy, when somebody yields their time, do they have to physically be present?
No, same process. You can email in, but that information, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, will be requested. So if they don't offer it, I'm hoping that our board secretary is following up to please, first and last name if it's not clear in the email, and then home address. But that won't be read. It'll just say, so the Becky is yielding her time.
Okay. And then my comment, of all people that should comment on this, the city of Beloit, you only get 3 minutes to speak. And 6 minutes twice a month, if you can't get your point across, I mean, I understand 9 minutes is nice and generous, but we have a certain amount of time that we want to be here. I understand this is our commitment, and I'm willing to listen, but I mean, somebody come in and speak to us 144 minutes throughout the course of a year. That's pretty generous.
I move approval of policy 187.
I'll second that approval.
All right, it's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Board Member Tia Johnson.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Shope, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Tia Johnson,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Nay.
Brian Anderson,
Nay.
Megan Miller,
Nay.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Sean Levy,
And I'm going to give us an aye for right now. Aye. So the motion has not passed. So what I want to do then, since that's 3-3, and we have 6 people tonight, let's come back around to what I was hoping to do before we even got to this place. So one of the things we have to think about first has been worked at the committee level. At the committee level, that's what the committee is bringing forth. But then when we get to the full board level, as we're doing, when things get out of the committee, they go straight to the consent agenda. We can pull things off the consent agenda and then have the opportunity to discuss them at the full board level. So there's a couple different things, there's another motion that could be added, but another way that we have worked is to kind of develop a consensus to see where we want to be at, and it's actually helped us to move through many things. So right now, I'm just going to ask the board members, is the sticking issue, or what is the major delineator? Is it 6 minutes versus 9 minutes, or is it the other things that have been done in the committee level? Because there's some things that have been added. So what are the features that are?
No, sure. I was going to jump in. I just wanted to echo everything that Board Member Levy said that we're proud of. I think overall the work that was added in the policy is really strong and necessary. I just feel like there just isn't a strong enough compelling reason for me to, I'm just of the mindset of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I just feel like we're denying an opportunity potentially, even though it's microscopically possible, and it's still possible. So I just like to lean toward being as inclusive as possible in our policy language, but I think everything else is really, really well done, and I'm very thankful to the time that the committee put into it.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. I just said it earlier. Again, I think that the revisions are fantastic. I support it all. It is just the 1 versus 2 people to yield their time for me.
I agree. The policy, everything else that you've done and added, I think is awesome. And I'm broke, don't fix it's is a good term, but and again, it's only happened a couple of times this year, so it's not like it's like it's the norm. So I'd like to leave it at 2.
I would recommend, since the motion failed, which is fine, that we table this until our next regular meeting, when hopefully we'll have 7, and then we'll have a clear outcome.
That's one option, or we can, if someone offers a different motion than what was already presented, we can take action on that too.
I make a motion that we amend policy 187, paragraph 3, last sentence, to leave it, to read, an individual may speak on behalf of a group. However, no more than 2 other persons may yield his, her, their time to any one speaker.
I'll second.
Can we have a roll call vote after discussion, please?
Okay. So there's a motion by Brian Nichols. Can you kind of repeat the motion for me?
I move that we, in paragraph 3 of policy 187, we leave the last sentence to say, an individual may speak on behalf of a group. However, no more than 2 other persons may yield his, her, their time to any one speaker. Person.
So basically the change is to continue to allow the 2 speakers.
Yes.
The yielders, okay. All right, so it's been moved by Board Member Nichols and seconded by Board Member Brian Anderson. Is there any discussion? Are we on to discussion?
I just have a question. I mean, since Greg's part of the policy committee, I mean, does it hurt us to wait until because we'll meet again in August? Right? Yeah, no, I know, and I'm just, so in whether or not we're voting for, because we're discussing the motion on the floor. So what would influence my vote is, are we not allowed to discuss the possibility of?
No, you can, but
Okay.
it needs to be germane to the motion that's already on the floor, not
Right.
other additional options.
No, yeah, no. So like my question to my colleagues on the board is, I obviously have just voiced in their previous vote that I agree with the motion that's on the floor. I'm just wondering, to those who are supporting this current motion on the floor, if I guess just what the urgency would be in doing it now versus waiting till we have all of us here. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I would say, having seconded the motion, I think, if it were to end in a 3-3 again, that essentially tables it by default, right? So I would be okay with that and get Greg's opinion as well.
Anybody else? All right, let's have a roll call vote. Ms. Shope?
Okay. Amy Levy,
Nay.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Tia Johnson,
Aye.
Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. Go forward. G. I think we have policy G, or item G.
Yes. Item G. Again, you know, this is one comment that is probably one of the most misused in this country. There is no separation of church and state in the U.S. Constitution. I have a copy. I'd be glad to share it with anybody if they want to read the Constitution. It's not in the state Constitution either. So the Board of Education recognizes the principles of freedom. I'm great with that. And then the other thing is the last paragraph. So when we've changed that to no person, that means even students could basically not invite somebody to church, synagogue, mosque, et cetera, without being in violation of school policy. And that, and also in the agenda, the copy of the agenda item says refer to policy 38111. And if you read 38111, these two kind of, this 881.3 basically kind of contradicts 381.11, which is all about religious freedom.
So just a quick comment on your point about person. So since it's in the 800 series, school community relations, I think that what you're bringing up is important to consider because, you know, language is used very flexibly. I would just have a question for Dr. Garrison, since it's our administrators that would be enforcing these policies. Is it fair to think, Dr. Garrison, that like this policy, it's under school community relations, that a principal or a teacher wouldn't overhear a student inviting them to like a religious, like, hey, come to Easter services with me, and penalize them in some way under this policy since it's listed under school community relations and not under students?
So, like I shared when we first brought this conversation up, I've never seen a situation in which a student has been penalized for conversations as such, because there's a personal conversation between a person and a person. It'll take a whole lot for a district administrator and or a teacher to be involved in those types of conversations and then to think otherwise, well, what shouldn't happen, what shouldn't happen, what should happen. And so it's kind of hard for me to sit and say, I don't believe this is a problem in our school district. And so that's just where I'm at right now with that thought.
Thank you for, thanks for clarifying.
Well, yes, thanks for clarifying. I guess the question I would ask then is why are we implementing this? You know, my understanding is the 800 series is how we work with the community. And this is diametrically opposed to working with the community. If we're saying, you know, I guess what are we really trying to accomplish with that sentence? What is it that we are, I don't know, this may be a little much, but what are we afraid of?
So fear never came up in the conversation. When I read that, I think of the context of proselytizing students. So forcibly encouraging students to convert their beliefs. That is something that you know, freedom of religion and choice that I would hope would not be tolerated in our buildings. But there wasn't a conversation about, hey, you want to come to service with me, that's seen as something bad or something that someone needed to intervene with. And then just for clarification, you had mentioned a 300 level policy. In the version that I'm looking at that was uploaded, at the bottom it has policies and other sources that are cross-referenced, and there's not a 300 level policy listed. So I was just wondering what your concern was.
It's right on the agenda item on tonight's agenda. It says see policy 381.11 for guidance.
Okay, but in the policy itself, if something is cross-referenced, that will show up at the bottom of the document, and that policy is not listed there.
I guess I got a question for the policy committee, just so I can understand, because previously it read no clergy or religious organization person will be allowed, and that makes perfect sense to me. So I'm just trying to think about who are we, who are we trying to capture other than that we changed it to person? Like, is it, like who doesn't fit the clergy or religious organization person that now just changing it to person will capture that?
So the conversation behind, with the context of proselytizing, so pressuring someone to convert their beliefs, whatever they are, we didn't want to just limit that to clergy person. We didn't think that was an appropriate act for anyone to do. I'm not a member of the clergy. I don't think it's appropriate for me to go to a school building or a school function and say, hey, what do you believe? You need to convert to this. So that's why it was broadened, because we don't think that's an appropriate act for anyone to engage in.
And Dr. Garrison, you're pretty confident that that's not an issue at this point?
Well, I also want to just add the note to the conversation as well. We say clergy, there's Sikhs, there's other religious leaders, and persons that add to that conversation as well. And so, like I said, for me, this is a conversation in which I haven't had to, necessarily deal with at the school level. And I made that statement before. I haven't had to deal with this at the school level if it pertains to being a problem. If it is a problem, we'll address it. And that's what we'll do. I think sometimes we forget that we are in the school and, and stuff is happening, and kids are being kids. But at the end of the day, if it's an issue, we will address it. And that's the goal of every school district, is to address the concerns as they come. And of course, if they are, something that we need to bring to the board's level, we will. And in this situation, you guys probably won't even hear about these types of things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis at the school level. And so, whether it's here in this policy or we have different conversations, we still deal with a wide variety of different themes that gets dealt with in the day-to-day conversations at the school level.
I hear what you're saying. However, one thing though, this happened when I addressed this the last meeting. Again, separation of church and state is not in the U.S. Constitution, and we all were sworn in to uphold the laws of the U.S. Constitution and the Wisconsin State Constitution, and that is a misused term in America, and it has been for years, probably since the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution, but it's still not in there.
So one thing that I would just add to that is it reads, the Board of Education recognize the principles of freedom and of freedom of religion and thank you, freedom of religion and separation of church and state. We're not saying where those ideals are located. It simply says that it recognizes the principle, and while we uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state, we deal with items outside of the Constitution of the state and the United States in the course of our work. So for those reasons, and we don't have to agree, that's perfectly fine, but I think as it's written is wholly appropriate.
Then why don't we just leave it at period after religion?
I'd like to.
And leave separation of church and state off.
So I'm going to jump in here for a minute too. So I'm just looking at the policy 881.3 as it currently stands. It was revised. It was last reviewed. It was adopted November 25th, 1980. It was last revised November 25th, 2003. Last reviewed August 1st, 2012. Prior revised dates 5/24/1988, 6/14/1994. The policy as it stands right now is the board recognizes the principles of freedom of religion and separation of church and state. The school system will make efforts to be flexible in allowing individuals to observe religious holidays when those holidays conflict with the school calendar, because we have employees and students who might not be of the faiths that are being represented on the calendar when the school calendar is set. And lastly, religious recruitment on school properties. No person will be allowed to recruit students for a religious purpose or organization on school properties or at school-sponsored activities. So I guess it is I graduated in 1995, so when this policy was adopted in 1980 and last reviewed in 2003, I lived my life in the school district of Beloit under the policy. I went to Sunday school with kids and asked kids to come to Sunday school and things like that. I'm a practicing school professional. I'm a school board member. I really don't see the need for the change of the policy at all, because the way that it would become a problem is if you have adults or other kids, there's one to ask somebody something, but then there's the level of harassment and when you're continuing to pressure and bully other people. So for me, I'm fine with the policy standing exactly as it is. So the question I kind of have is, like, if we don't approve a change to the policy, are we still under our old policy?
Yes. If we don't approve a change, then the policy stays the same.
Okay.
President Levy and Mrs. Levy, I have a question, and forgive me, I'm new. Oh, do you know how long ago that was? So the title is Relations with Organizations of Faith. So my question is, what relations or what are the policies or regulations for our interactions with organizations of faith, but not on school property? Is there another policy for that? What are we doing to interact with the different organizations of faith in Beloit? That's how is that regulated? Thank you.
Community partners or community
So
partners.
there's no discrimination with community partners. People come to us in many different ways, whether it's different religious organizations, and as a school district, we will partner with who comes with us, and as long as it meets the mission and vision of our school district, partnerships happen, throughout. And so I haven't had the experience of not partnering with people who want to partner with us in a positive manner in many different ways, and so that's the best way for me to answer that question.
So this,
I'm sorry, I'm asking, is there a policy or something to address that?
yes, so this may be helpful. If you'll note, the policy we're currently discussing is 881.1. And then it goes through the list down to 882.3. But the original policy that branches off is 881, which is relations with community agencies, which is the broad umbrella. And then there's some nuances that have their own point after that policy to provide clarity. So for example, relations with the faith we're looking at with law enforcement, with health authorities, with fire department, and with educational agencies. Those all have a different nuance that have their own policy. But the relationships that you're talking about are covered in 881.
Thank you.
And just adding that reading is the Board of Education recognizes the importance of maintaining cooperative relationships with community agencies that support the goals of the district. Board of Education support may come in the form of attendance at events sponsored by these agencies, participation on committees, service on boards, and attendance at annual meetings. However, attendance does not necessarily assume purchase of tickets or a donation. We are in a discussion of what to do with the current policy of, is that 881.3?
Yes.
For G. So do we have a motion on the floor? Is that where we're at?
I move
And we're just in
approval
our
of policy.
I'm just,
Oh,
no,
sorry.
I'm asking where are we at in the process here?
Well, I definitely don't want to curtail or shut down if there's something new that someone wants to say. So I will pause if there's new information that people want the group to consider. Hearing none, I move approval of policy 881.3 as it is presented to the board.
I will second.
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy, seconded by Board Member Megan Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay.
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 Nay. 3-3.
I move that we table policy 881.3 until our next regular board meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy to table the policy into our next meeting, and seconded by Tia Johnson.
Point of order, could we, instead of table, could we postpone?
Well, I put in the date, so that, because table is indefinitely, but that's why I
Okay.
added the date.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, motion passes unanimously. On to 6A. State of Wisconsin 23-25 biennial budget implications on the school district of Beloit.
Mike, or repeat. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board this evening, give you an update on some recent state legislation specific to the public education system, the school district of Beloit in particular. My intent tonight's not really to provide any update, or my intent's to provide the update to the committee, the school board, the district staff, parents, community of the implications of recent state legislation and the impact on our district and our budget and finances. I will certainly strive to leave the politics out of the presentation. We will concentrate really more on the current law and not necessarily beyond the 23-25 biennial budget. The content for this presentation was gathered from various sources, including the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. I've been participating in a capital chat that they have been doing every Friday noon since really mid-February. The last one occurred on July 7th. That helped summarize a lot of this. I also grabbed some pieces from the School Administrators Alliance. They did a budget recap, also dated July 7th, 2023, as well. So those are really the two primary sources of the information. There's two key pieces of legislation that we'll talk about, and they kind of go hand in hand. There's 2023 Wisconsin Act 11. This was the agreement that Governor Evers reached with the legislature with regards to shared revenues for municipalities. And as part of that agreement, he kind of worked in some education components as well. So 2023 Wisconsin Act 11 increases the low revenue limit ceiling and increases per pupil payments to support educational needs of district residents attending elsewhere. We'll get into the specifics of that in just a few slides. And then the most recent piece of legislation was the 23-25 state biennial budget, which is actually summarized as 2023 Wisconsin Act 19. That increases the per pupil revenue limit increase by $325 in each of the 2 years of the biennial. And then it also removes the high poverty aid, increases special education reimbursements, and then there's some others as well. And again, we'll talk about that in a few slides also. So we'll begin with 2023 Wisconsin Act 11. And again, I'll point out that this increases the low revenue limit ceiling to a minimum of $11,000 per student. Note that that's for most school districts, and we'll come back to that. It increases the per pupil payments to support educational needs of district residents attending elsewhere as well. Those being through open enrollment, private school choice, independent charter schools, et cetera. We'll comment on all of those. So let's start by taking a look at that low revenue limit ceiling increase to a minimum of $11,000 per student. That essentially allows all districts that had a revenue base below $11,000, Beloit including, that would be able to increase to that $11,000 mark. Essentially, it would generate about $670 in additional per student for the school district of Beloit after the $325 increase. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about all of that later. However, there is a state law, 2017 Wisconsin Act 141, also found in section 121.905 sub 1 of Wisconsin stats, that essentially prevents school districts that have had a failed operating referendum during or after the 2018-19 school year from being able to utilize this additional revenue opportunity, increasing to that $11,000 per student for 3 school years following the school year in which the referendum was held, or until a subsequent operational referendum is passed. So Beloit falls into this category where we had a recent operational referendum that narrowly was defeated. So thus this implication or this state law applies to us. Let's put some context to it now. Because of that operational referendum being defeated by the voters, the school district of Beloit is unable to receive an approximate $4 million in additional revenue. That revenue would come from a combination of both state aid and local property taxes per year. So the school district of Beloit will forego approximately $4 million in revenues to support our educational programming and achievement efforts for our students until the earlier of one of the 2 following. The 26-27 school year, that's 3 school years after the referendum passes, that would equate to a loss of approximately $12 million in revenues to the school district over those 3 years. Or if we were to go back to the voters with an operational referendum question, which would in fact be supported by the voters, then we can utilize that additional authority sooner. On top of that $11,000, the other big impact from 2023 Wisconsin Act 11 deals with the per pupil payments to support educational needs of district residents attending elsewhere through open enrollment, private school choice, and independent charter. So in open enrollment, our 3 largest, you probably all know this, right? I mean, our 3 largest districts nearby that receive students from the school district of Beloit are going to be Beloit Turner, the Clinton Community School District, and Orfordville Parkview School District. As an example, a private school choice program would be Rock County Christian School, and as an example, the independent charter school would be the Lincoln Academy. So what does this all mean for the school district of Beloit? Excuse me. Those increased payments, we'll just drop down to the bottom of the slide. It's anticipated that these increases in payments will increase district expenditures by over $2 million to support the needs of those district residents attending school elsewhere, starting here in the 23-24 school year. If you look at the columns highlighted in yellow, you'll see the increases for each category of student. In the 22-23 school year, as an example, private school choice programs K-8, the state valued them at $8,399. Here in the now current 23-24 school year, we'll pay $9,874 per student utilizing that option, and then that'll jump up even further in the 24-25 school year. Yeah, thank you. Any questions about that yet? I'll do it.
Mr. Chady, I have
Yeah.
a question on
Yes.
on that, what you just, that slide. So that's what we're going to have to pay those other schools, but we're still going to get $10,400, $10,500, right? From the state, we pass through, for next year, we'll pass through $9,874.
We will receive around $10,400 per student in the 23-24 school year. However, yes, if a student is going to a private school choice program in their K-8, we'll pay out $9,874. If they're in a high school private school choice, while we're receiving perhaps $10,400, our outgoing expense will be $12,362. However, I would also caution and caveat this, that we receive funds for resident students attending a public school educational opportunity. If they are outgoing to a private school, we don't receive funds for them. They aren't included in our resident student count for revenue purposes because they're not going to a public school institution. So it's essentially a straight dollar out, no dollar in to support them.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
You bet.
I have like a couple questions actually really quick just based on that question. Does the state still have a $7 billion budget surplus?
The state has a significant budget surplus, the value of which I would not be able to tell you.
Okay, yeah, I think last time I checked it was like 7 billion, but whatevs. Could you help us, just because one thing that has come up in previous budget workshops that I think is really helpful for the public to understand is, can you talk to the point about how what you just described in terms of like that $10,000, like how much, like what percentage of that goes just to the ancillary costs of the district? So it's not like a student leaves, the money goes with them, and then there's a whole classroom relatively untouched. Like how much of that like impacts like the brick and mortar, the facilities, the teacher, the resources that then kind of like explain the impact that has on the remaining students in the district?
I think I'll try to do that, and Megan, you can help push me, encourage me if I need to go someplace else as well.
Oh, you're cool.
Even though a student may depart the school district of Beloit, so long as they are still being educated locally, we still have some obligations to those students for some provision of special education services, in some instances, transportation services as well. So there are additional costs over and above the per pupil payment that we have to transition to those districts through the state, yes.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and then I'll be quiet and I actually have to step out and go relieve the babysitter that's hanging out with my kids. But I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding about like if you have a classroom of like 25 students and you lose 3 of those kids, like that pays for the teacher for the remaining 22 students. So somebody explained it to me like that once and that offered me a lot of clarity. And I just think when we get it, just based on the information you've already given, it's a lot of numbers and it's kind of hard to contextualize where the impact lies. So I appreciate you taking the time to address that.
Yeah, I'll quickly share an example that may be beneficial. Say we have 25 students leave a district. Many people think, well, that's one less teacher that's needed. And that may be true if all 25 students departed the same grade level, but they don't, right? They depart over 12, 14 different grades, and as much as you have 25 students departing, you have additional students coming in, so it's spread out. So many people will think, well, less students, less teachers. To some extent, that can be true. Less students, you don't need as many bus routes. To some extent, that perhaps can be true, but your bus routes may get longer. Students are going to ride longer. The 25 students that may exit aren't in the same classroom. They don't all ride the same bus route, so it's not as easy to address. I'll continue on. Just real quick, a summary on 2023 Wisconsin Act 11. Again, that failed April of 23 operating referendum. We miss out on approximately $4 million in annual additional revenue opportunities over the next 3 years. As a result of those per pupil payment increases, we anticipate that our expenses will increase by over $2 million. So really the true negative net impact on the school district of Beloit, $6,125,000 is probably a very strong approximation. We'll talk quickly about the actual biennial budget. The items here, again, all districts in the state receive a $325 per pupil increase in the revenue limit in both the 23-24 school year and the 24-25 school year, so long as they are below the $11,000 revenue limit ceiling, which Beloit would be. High poverty aid remains in state statutes. However, the legislature and the governor have elected not to fund it. So we'll talk about that as well. Our special education reimbursement rate increases to 33.3%. Excuse me, and thank you. And then finally, there is an increase in the state allocation to general state aid and equalization aid as part of the biennial budget as well. So again, we'll talk a little bit about each of these points. The $325 per pupil increase in the revenue limit, while that sounds beneficial, the impact on school districts varies. Some districts will receive the full $325 value. Other school districts will receive a portion of that. So as an example, if the school district of Beloit would receive the full $325 per pupil increase, we would receive an approximate $3.2 million of additional revenues. However, when you put the $325 increase into the revenue limit formula, it's like a 4-page formula, it's pretty complex, but I'd be more than happy to share it with any of you. What actually happens in our case is that our hold harmless exemption within the revenue limit formula, which provides kind of a catch-all of $1.8 million, that gets netted out and reduced so that our actual net reduction of the revenue limit, that's right, we actually see a reduction in our revenue limit for the 23-24 of $166,000. So while we are being told we get $325 more per student, the end result after we factor it all through is the school district of Beloit will have the access to fewer funds next year than we had this past year. And again, the high poverty aid, in the 22-23 school year, the school district of Beloit received $341,000 in high poverty aid. Again, the state budget eliminated the allocation for high poverty aid, though it retained the program. High poverty aid actually falls within the revenue limit. So essentially, that will be offset in either one of two fashions, one being through state equalization aid, or provides the school district an opportunity to increase local property taxpayers to recoup those funds. Point number 3, special education aid. The budget increases that to 33.3%, which is good and beneficial. It's important to keep in mind that special education categorical aid actually reimburses districts for a percentage of their actual costs related to the provision of services in the prior school year. So in 22-23, our state special education categorical aid was just over $4.4 million. Just kind of doing an estimation approximation, we do anticipate then, based on expenditures for special ed remaining fairly stable, that we would see about $4.6, nearly $4.7 million in special ed categorical aid. That would be an increase of approximately $267,000. That then does permit us, or helps us prevent moving $267,000 out of the general fund through our interfund transfer program. So there is kind of an offset there and a benefit. And finally is the increase in state general aid. That's very heavy in the state biennial budget. In 22-23, the school district of Beloit was allocated almost $68 million. We received our July 1st aid estimate just, 2.5 weeks or so ago for this current 23-24 school year. And the state aid estimate currently is $63 million, just over that. That number will change. It always does. It changes for every school district in the state between the July 1st aid estimate, which is based on preliminary budget numbers that the DPI has. And then on October 15th, they will finalize based upon school district's actual results. spending results for the most recent school year. So, will we see a $4 million, almost $5 million reduction? Will we be able to recoup some of that? Still to be determined. That's a lot of information I tossed your way. Some of you have had the opportunity to hear it twice. Some of you have looked at it online ahead of time. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Before we jump into questions, real quick, Ms. Chase, thank you for your presentation. Again, when we was putting this, when of course the conversations around this was putting this together, the budget was not necessarily approved, and then it got approved, and then we start, putting this all together as it pertains to the implications for the school district of Beloit. Again, not knowing certain responses that comes from the state and legislation that will come from the state at times does hurt. In this case, it hurt us tremendously in that a lot of the funds that we would hope to have seen, we won't see based off of this legislation, whether it be from a not passed referenda or from the whole harmless clauses to, to the even the high poverty aid conversation, taking that away from us. It's just amazing. It's amazing that, in this situation, this budget, it does highly impact the school district of Beloit. And our actions and the things that we're trying to do to address these conversations accordingly, we're still working through. And so just like I've been able to, or the district has been able to, and of course, with the board as well, we've been able to look at our staffing, we've been able to look at our insurances, we've been able to look at different areas where we can save money, but hey, there's only so much you can continue to look at and squeeze down before, you have to rely on different opportunities for us to get better. Now, I'm not a bearer of bad news. I truly believe that there's additional things that we can possibly look at to look at our budget and look at ways we can possibly have some savings. But, just, duly noted that this is collective here. And the board has to, board, community, everybody has to see our conversation for what it really is and come together to do something, different for our kids. I know Mr. Chady mentioned that it's about $10,400 what we received from the state. That's the 9th lowest in the state as well. The lowest, I think, isn't that, am I correct about that?
Yeah, we saw some information from Robert W. Baird Public Finance today that listed those districts that were impacted negatively, is probably the best way to frame it, as a result of some of this recent legislation. And the way that I reviewed the data appeared to show that the school district of Beloit had the 9th lowest per pupil revenue limit value in the state. And there's 420-ish, plus or minus probably 5 or 8 school districts in the state. So just to kind of, a lot of districts are able to generate more per pupil than us.
Correct. And again, it just goes back to show, again, we've been doing the district, I believe, has been doing the best job it can do over the many years, educating our kids with almost one could argue with some of the least amount of funds. Now, one could look at that many different ways, and I'm not trying to, again, get into the politics of the conversation, but I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are still working through how we can actually, save money here in our school district. I've been a fiscal steward of our dollars. I've tried to look at many creative ways to bring us back a positive budget. I will continue to do that, of course, under my leadership and the district's leadership and the board's leadership. And we, again, of course, the community leadership as well. We all have to look at different ways in which we want to figure out how we can support our school district. And of course, our district be fiscal agents of the funds that are given to us. Again, I want to thank Mr. Chady for, of course, putting this presentation together with me over the past 2 weeks. And of course, here we are now. We're still working through this budget. The dollars hadn't came in yet. We know what they're going to be giving us. And so there's still opportunities for advocacy. I want to make sure I note that as well. I'm still, looking at ways we can advocate for different possibilities. As Board Member Miller has already mentioned, there's about, over $5 billion, let's just say it like that, over $5 billion in surplus. And so, we're looking for different ways that we can advocate for, the school district of Beloit, and not only the school district of Beloit, but the other district that was highly impacted by this budget, to see how we can possibly come together and to see if there's some different things that we can sign off on and, send it to our legislators. And hopefully it gets to the desk of the governor for some reconsideration as pertains to this budget and how it impacts districts like us. And so I just want to make sure I noted that. Again, as a school district, it does look real tough for us. But I'm very optimistic that we will continue to do the things that we need to do to bring a zero budget, but understanding the different challenges we have is a real thing.
Board members, questions? I'll jump in then. This is one of those spaces. So, Mr. Chair, can you go back to like slide 6?
I can. I'm not sure what the numbers are on these, so you'll tell me.
I think,
Hold on here, I got them in front of me too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think,
the one I'm looking for is the impact of our no vote.
what? That one there?
Right.
Got it, okay.
So kind of one of the things that, is that we have some of this conversation, like I said, there's, the politics part, I'm a board member, so the politics part is the politics part, because there are choices that are being made that are negatively impacting the school district of Beloit and some other districts, but we're here and this is negatively impacting us. For our space and for what we need to do, as we've said before, we have a strategic plan. We're working in our strategic plan. We hired a superintendent. We didn't have business officials. With the superintendent came business officials, and we're still fully staffing those departments because we are a district with over 700 people, and we need those positions. And even when we hired Dr. Garrison, that was one of his concerns, and even Dr. Anderson, when he was here with us, about the lack of the finance people that we needed. So we find ourselves with this $4.4 million deficit that we're working through, and I know that we've got some positive news there, but we're waiting for the official audits and everything to come in to certify exactly where we're at. But what we did is we moved toward our ad hoc committee. We formed 2 questions, because the thing that we were trying to do is exercise some agency, because we're in a situation and we need to address it. The 2 questions were there. There was a no vote. And like I said, our voters responded also. And like I said, for many different reasons. But there is an impact to that no. There's impact for us going to the ballot and not being successful, and there's an impact to the no. So then as we look where we're at now in our consolidation and right sizing, our deficit reduction steps that we're taking, we're looking and we've kind of paced out for people that now we're at July 1, and the numbers are coming to be more solid, which gives us a picture of where we'll be at. From here, we can look towards October 15th, November 1st, when we have to set our budget and have those levies set in place, and then again, April 2024. So from where you're sitting and you just examine our position, about that slide there, so right now, when you say that, we've lost at approximately 12 million, the opportunity for that, and I think we've had this conversation before about, like, if you're trying to restore your fund balance, usually people do that by going to operational referendum. But so now what's in place is technically, there's money that the district does not have access to until we wait the 3 years, or we have a different response when we go to referendum.
That would be correct. I mean, our options are go back to the voters at some point in the future with another operational question and ask for their support, do a better job about educating the reasons why. Or, we can wait. I mean, here's the thing. If you go back to the voters with another operational referendum, and if that operational referendum is defeated, that 2026-27 becomes another year or two out. So the 3 years that you have to wait resets every time an operational referendum is defeated. So I would summarize it that the school district of Beloit is kind of in a hardship. There are really a couple of different ways out of the hardship. Significantly reduce expenditures, which comes with significant reductions in staff and programming, or look for opportunities to increase revenues. In one of those, the best opportunity, honestly, to address that equation is going to be an operational referendum. We can increase fees for things, whatever, but that's very minuscule in the greater good. It's a unique position. My operational referendum experiences of the past have been that generally you do both. There is some efforts to reduce expenditures, and then it's kind of a give and take. So we do our part, we ask the public then to do their part by supporting a question as well. But it's really important to keep in mind that, future operating referendum questions, if defeated, only extend that 3-year impact time frame and will kind of hurt the school district even more so, because that means just further and further budgetary reductions that we have to make.
And I just want to, again, I think it's also very important to know we're still in the business of educating kids. Like, we are in the business of educating students. And, old school saying is you can't keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing and say do more and more and more. It's just those two things, unfortunately, doesn't match. And so we have been making some steps to decrease our budget. Again, since our coming together, since November, we have really moved forward to save our district almost to the tune of $4+ million. And so those are the things that we are doing to make sure people understand that we are being the fiscal agents and responsible for our budget, again, since we came together. And I think the more we come together in these conversations, and like Mr. Che just mentioned, it's still a request that everybody, helps us in this conversation to educate our kids. Again, we're doing a lot more for, and one could argue this conversation, a lot more for a lot less than what we're getting from the state as it compares to other districts around us. And that's just what we have to continuously deal with here in the school district of Beloit. Now, I'm all for, again, continuously looking at things that we need to look at to manage our budget better. And we have been doing that. And so hopefully the public will continue to see the things that we've talked about we've been doing.
So like I said, this does, it just kind of lines up with some other conversations that I know that we'll continue to have. We'll have to move early to put things in perspective for our community. I know we still have different and important decisions to make that revolve around finances in terms of increases for staff and other questions and things like that. So we'll just have to keep working our way through it. All right, thank you for the presentation. Anybody else, any question or? All right, thank you. Is Board Member Miller, did you just join by phone? Okay. Thought that might have been. So we're now on to future meeting dates, 7. I closed the agenda that had the dates on it. Okay. What is the date? Future board meeting dates, Policy Committee will be meeting on August 9th at 5:30 PM. Business Operations and Finance, August 15th. Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Service, August 15th. Human Resources, August 15th, 6:30 PM. Regular board meeting, August 15th, 7 PM. And our governance meeting, August 22nd at 6 PM. We have 8A, executive session. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education in a closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy and seconded by Board Member Brian Anderson. Mrs. Schultz, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Tia Johnson?
Aye.
Brian Nichols?
Aye.
Brian Anderson?
Aye.
Megan Miller?
Aye.
Amy Levy?
Aye.
And Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. We will be closing, adjourning from closed session. So tonight, this concludes our recording.